Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be looking at Hawkeye Kate Bishop and Hawkeye Clint Barton at the same time because essentially they have the same build. Speed types with a CTP of energy, maxed out ISO or stage 11 Power of Angry Hulk, pretty much identical Uru with the difference that, no, literally no difference. He has 2 Odin's Blessings and she has 2 Odin's Blessings as well. So they have the exact same build and they're basically played exactly the same way. And I sort of feel exactly the same way about these characters. And it's not my usual review because, well, you'll have to watch it to find out why. So now that you know the builds, let's dive into some actual content with them. I'm going to be focusing on PvE, although I do think that maybe Hawkeye has a little bit of value for PvP, particularly with that third skill, the counterattack ignore iframe, which is always so juicy. But speed types right now in PvP is dominated by 2 words, 1 hyphenated word, Spider-Man. So I don't think Hawkeye is going to be making too much noise. And also with PvP, it's about adoption. And again, I just don't see players being like, you know what? I don't want to play with Spider-Man in PvP anymore. I want to play with Hawkeye. So as much as I think he could have some value, I think that's ultimately going to lie in the hands of Alliance Conquest players or super hardcore fans. And the vast majority of you are going to want to use this character in PvE content, which is where I'm going to be focusing the rest of my review. But I will say that the comparison I just made between Hawkeye and Spider-Man in PvP is sort of a foreshadowing moment for what I'm going to be saying about these characters for the remainder of the video. So let's go ahead and take a look at what they are very, very good at. First up is Null, and for both Kate Bishop and Hawkeye Clint Barton, Null and, to a lesser extent, Quicksilver and Corvus are where these characters are going to absolutely rip it and shine, because with just a CTP of energy or an Obelisk that has a lot of ignore dodge, you can cap their ignore dodge for most content. Although the cap on ignore dodge is actually closer to 250%, that's honestly not necessary for 100% of the content in Marvel Future Fight. Once you get around 100%, and I can't dodge this cage, you're fine. And so because of their agent ability, which gives them a 10% ignore dodge, and because of other passives that they have, plus the ignore dodge from a CTP of energy, like I mentioned, she's sitting at 106% ignore dodge. And then similarly, Hawkeye Clint Barton is sitting at about 102 or 100% ignore dodge. So this is crazy good for you players that don't have a lot of ignore dodge from strikers, or if you just struggle with that, because you don't have to bring any of those strikers. You can literally focus all of your efforts on just increasing damage or increasing survivability or some combination of them. In addition, the first phase of Null sees Null not moving, which is really, really good for Kate because her skills have a bit of a targeting issue, and I'm going to be referring to this targeting issue quite a few times. So I'll just let you know, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But essentially, when you watch her 5th skill in the skill preview, basically Hawkeye jumps out with her and he stands still and he fires in one direction, like the band. And what that basically does is it creates a situation where if the boss moves around too much, and here we actually can get debuffed, so I have to pop the co-op skill, but if you get moved around too much by the boss, you're essentially in a situation where you can't deal consistent damage. Now there we were supposed to deal consistent damage, I'm not sure what happened, but that is really the big issue that I see, and Null does like to move around. So it's sort of like Moonstone. If you guys have tried playing Moonstone versus Null, if you pop off her Awakening ability, but then Null moves around, he actually moves away from the beams. So I actually like to pin him around one of the walls of the arena. I know the arena is kind of circular, so you're like, where are the walls? It's a circle, Alex. Listen, the walls are there. You just got to run up to them, face first, and you'll find them. So here in the second phase is where you're going to see her look a lot more pedestrian, a lot more like just an average character, because you're like, yeah, the damage is kind of a little bit lower, Alex. And the reason for that is because of the aforementioned targeting. The other issue is without iframe ignore, except on her Transcendent skill, which you cancel right away, you kind of can't pop her Transcendent skill when you know that Null is going to be doing attacks like that, where he jumps up and down, because those are iframe attacks, and you will basically lose targeting on him and then not have any damage. However, you can see that she's surprisingly tanky. Despite taking a lot of hits from Null, because I'm not very good at keeping her out of his way, she keeps on trucking. She heals really well, and she sort of bounces back from his damage. So I'm sort of talking about pros and cons of the character, but this basically encompasses my entire review, so I might as well go ahead and pop off here. She does have a bit of a ramp up on her damage, like there's a little bit of a noticeable delay after you cancel 5, after you cancel 6, so you can't really squeeze a lot of damage out of her in those small moments. So punishing bosses during phase transitions is a lot harder than it is for other characters who have really snappy, really bursty rotations. But you can still pick your spots and find some nice openings for Kate, and you will see her damage spike when Null decides to stand still because of the aforementioned targeting that she has that's really good for bosses who stand still. So I think her value may have been a bit overstated initially when she was tested because of how much, or how little I should say, Null moves around in the first phase. And here you have to be careful. I've made this mistake twice now. You actually can't target Null with your third skill from that far away. You can target him with 5, but not with 3. So my advice to you is either start with 3 so that she moves into targeting range, or get closer and open with 5. But I was trying to stay away from the tentacles, that little star pattern, because I didn't want to take too much damage. So here we're going to pop off. The invincibility from 6 is very important here, but as you can see, it doesn't last very long. So she gets knocked out of it, and then you basically can't go back. And she also, you can see, took a lot of damage, 100,000 HP, and she's still taking that much damage. So you basically have no choice but to wait for Papa Thor. And then here is where the last sort of problem of this character goes, although this is content that she does excel at, and this is a very good showing for a character with just a regular CTP. I do have to warn you that this is extremely tight, and actually I don't know if I'm going to clear this one this time. Okay, I don't know what the timing on that was, but that was very, very close. She almost didn't make it. So although she does really well in the first phase, in the first half of the fight when Null's in the chair, she does look a lot more average in the second phase. And then in that last phase there, I definitely notice her having a little bit of an issue punching through that last bit of damage that you need to finish Null off. Here against Infinity Ultron is where I think Kate is going to seem a little bit worse and perhaps not as good as she would otherwise be, because when Ultron doesn't move, you get full damage and it's really, really good. However, as you'll see here, when he does move, you get much less. So that was like barely a bar's worth of damage, and Ultron likes to move a lot. Here, I started my 5th skill and he decided to warp, and her 4th and 3rd skills don't have enough range to target all the way out there, and so you're basically stuck just losing a rotation, losing a proc. That can happen to a lot of other characters, no doubt. It actually just happened again. I'm getting pretty unlucky with these teleports that Ultron's deciding to do, but it exposes the flaw of the character. Now, this is not a flaw that's unique to her, so I don't want to stress this too much. A lot of characters struggle versus Ultron because of this, but it's also why we highlight other characters that don't have this problem, right? Because they have really stellar targeting on their skills. They can, you know, sort of keep up with Ultron, and actually show you one of those characters later on in the video. Now, this right here with the optimization phases, I think the other big issue with Kate, she's slow-footed. She's like not that fast of a character. And then on top of that, she doesn't have a lot of lingering hits besides maybe her 3rd skill. And so what actually happens a lot of the time is you can't stop him from optimizing. And if you can't stop him from optimizing, then you're losing a bunch of time anyways to these optimization phases. It's hard to lose less than like 30 seconds from these optimization phases. So you'll see these really nice bursts of damage when he's not moving, and you're like, oh, this is great, Kate's awesome. But then he decides to move, he decides to teleport, he decides to do that attack where he slides across the arena, and then you're like, oh man, her damage is really not that good. So it really puts her and her damage at the mercy of the RNG, right? If Ultron decides to move around a lot, you can have a really terrible run. If Ultron decides to stand still a lot, you can actually have a really good run. And so she could be good for Ultron, but ultimately I would say you're better off with some of her competitors like Makari, although she's more expensive. Like, look at this here. I started targeting him and he went middle. I literally did less than, that was less than a half a bar of damage. Could I have waited? Like, people are looking at what just happened. They're like, Alex, you could have just waited to use the Transcended skill. Maybe he was going to jump middle. Yeah, true, I could have waited, but that's basically the complete antithesis of this battle. Right, if you're telling players, if your advice to players to get a character like Kate Bishop to work in this boss is to wait and see what his next move is going to be, he's going to optimize so many times because you're waiting and delaying your next rotation that you're going to lose the fight anyways. And I can tell you right now, at the current pace, 2 minutes gone, and he's not even at half of his HP. this is not going to happen. This is probably not going to happen. And so Makari and Thena both being able to clear this stage and higher with CTPs of Rage tells me that it's more than, you know, it's more than just the damage they're doing. Because if you look at something like ABX, which a lot of other content creators have highlighted, Kate Bishop can like almost keep up with Makari and ABX, which is super impressive. But the trick with ABX is very small arena, very big target, and also the target doesn't move around a lot. So it doesn't expose the downside or the one flaw in Kate Bishop's arsenal, which is that once you pop her rotation, you basically set your zone of damage, and if the boss moves out of that zone of damage, your DPS just hard tanks. Now the other issue is that Hawkeye's kind of the same way. Let's go check it out. Stage 45 for Clint Barton. I had no clue when his rework was first announced that this is how good he was going to end up being. But yeah, just with a regular CTP of energy, this is actually what you can expect from him. It's a difficult clear, no doubt. But once you get the hang of it, it is very, very good. There we go. We got that cancel, or that dodge, I should say. And now we're going to build up to our next tier 3. But yeah, like Hawkeye, like Captain America Falcon, he also thrives when he pops that tier 3. You just get massive damage, and it's just so satisfying to see that crazy burst from the accumulation rock up and just fly through. I think we actually just dodged altogether the second stun. That's awesome. So here I think we have a bit of a proc issue. No worries. We gained 5 seconds and then lost 5 seconds. But that's okay. We're still on pretty good pace here. He's going to be slower than Kate because of the higher stage, but I still think he does this. He clears the stage very, very fast. As you can see, huge burst damage from the 6. And we're going to build up to another tier 3 that we can hopefully pop. So I can show you, and this is a perfect run so far. I'm going to show you the thing that makes Hawkeye better than Kate. Because the 6th skill, right? Because his 6 has iframe ignore, you actually can pop it when Null does these attacks. And then you can sort of pour on this extra damage. We actually didn't get the luckiest proc because for whatever reason, Null decided to like shift backwards and forwards. I think like a striker pushed him. But basically where Kate doesn't have iframe ignore, Hawkeye does. And so where Kate has to run away or you have to switch characters or whatever, because Null is going to do some funky jump in the air and lose targeting, Hawkeye's like, you know what, let's gun it. Let's just go for it. So I was actually at one point testing them together against Null, but I found that Kate was just not cutting it for me consistency-wise in terms of her damage, whereas Clint was. So here I can just pop 6 and continue doing damage. Should I have done that there? Maybe not if I wanted to do a more optimal run because I just used up the tier 3 when I only needed to do a bar of damage. But it's showing you there where other characters, and then again, we're going to keep doing the Kate comparison, would have to wait for Null to come back down from the iframe. Hawkeye's like, nah, B. But on the, on the flip side, to look at the pros and the cons, he also has that issue where if Null moves around too much, because these explosions are all centered in one particular zone, right? So if Null decides to move, actually going to switch here. If Null decides to move, you're sort of out of luck and you lose a bunch of damage. And again, we're going to highlight this against Infinity Ultron, where it is most apparent because he moves. He moves. He moves. So we're going to go ahead and pop 6, and hopefully we don't take too much damage from this attack. Awesome. But wow, we also didn't have enough damage to push him to the next phase. But I think we're still on a really good pace here. 2 minutes left. We just took a little bit too much damage. I would say maybe Hawkeye's a little bit less tanky than Kate, if I had to guess. It's not that much. The only difference is that Kate has HP Urus because she can afford it. Whereas Hawkeye, and he also has a kind of a delayed heal. Whereas Hawkeye needs the crit rate. Well, he doesn't really need the crit rate completely, but, a little bit more. So anyways, we're on pace pretty well right now. We got 90 seconds left. And I think also the last phase is where Hawkeye's going to do a little bit better here. We're getting kind of unlucky with the tornadoes deciding to come in at the worst possible time. Well, let's pop the 6 here and see. Awesome. Really nice damage. Really good stuff. And then we just build up one more tier 3. Ooh, we got pumped there. We don't want to. We actually want to slow down here. Uh-oh. Actually, okay. We'll see. We'll see. If our cooldowns are fast enough. Okay, we should be okay. I'm a little bit skeptical. I wanted him to have max HP. But yeah, we actually can't. We actually have to pop the co-op skill. I died. Okay, yeah, that was pretty unlucky. I couldn't pop the co-op skill for some reason, but I'm gonna leave this run as is because it's a very good run, and he was actually going to clear it with about 30 seconds left, which means that you can climb a little bit higher. And what I want to highlight for Hawkeye specifically is he's doing this without the full buffs. So that's where I think some of the sort of pro and con of these characters comes into play. When you compare him to someone like Spider-Man or Captain America Falcon, they both take full advantage of White Fox's buffs, and there aren't any other buff characters here. I guess you could use Echo, but it's a defensive buff. It's not a support buff. So that leadership buff that White Fox gives to Spider-Man, that 60% or 65% increased damage versus supervillains, and I think it's like 30% damage reduction. That's huge, right? And she also gives it to Falcon, whereas and I think she also gives it to Silk. Whereas Hawkeye doesn't take advantage of that. So the fact that he can almost keep up, even Makari, right? Makari gets it. So the fact that he can almost keep up and the fact that Kate can almost keep up, I think is a huge win. And so that's sort of factored into my final analysis of these characters. But basically in the same way that Kate struggles because of the targeting, not that he needs it, but I also get 20% ignore dodge from Taskmaster because Hawkeye does have the Weapon Master passive. So when Ultron decides to stay still, I get about 1.5 bars worth of damage from my rotation, which is really nice. And then I get a really nice like 4.5 bars worth of damage from the tier 3. However, when he decides to move around, it's basically the same story as Kate, and I actually think it's a little bit worse than Kate's because Hawkeye has an even higher concentration of his damage. Now here, he's actually a little bit faster than Kate, and he has a little bit better movement, but you're basically going to have the same issue where you can let Ultron optimize unintentionally because you just don't have enough lingering hits, and you don't have enough damage in between without proccing your obelisk to warrant sort of interrupting him and letting that situation play out. That's actually nice. Let's see if that works. Oh, it does work. That's really clutch. Okay, so I didn't know about the 5th skill being able to do that, but that's actually really nice. Okay, I may be softening up my stance here a little bit on Hawkeye, but he basically has the same issue as Kate, where, like I said, if you get good targeting, you're laughing. If Ultron decides to play hockey and start skating around the rink, you're sort of in Splitsville. So I want to show you guys what it looks like when he decides to move around, because it's really unfortunate, but the damage is really bad. The damage, see right there, perfect example. You can go back, you can rewind that clip, but you can just play it back. As soon as he moved, the damage, his HP was moving down, and it just stopped. Literally as soon as he moved. So I was really lucky. That was like 90 seconds of luck, of good luck, and that's why we're doing so well. And so I could probably clear this stage. However, if we were to try it again and run it back and get bad luck at the beginning, because Ultron can open up, instead of opening up with a skill where he stands still, he can open up with a skill where he moves around, and he could have done it 3 or 4 times by now instead of only doing it once. If that had been the case, I would probably be around 20 or 21 bars. Similar situation to Kate, probably not going to have enough speed to clear it. So for those of you who have already invested in Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, and you're sort of seeing or sort of like seeing that drop off or that difference where sometimes it seems like the run's really good and sometimes it seems like the run's really not that good, that's really what you're encountering, is that targeting issue. However, I'm still sort of leaning towards Hawkeye as the one that I prefer, despite how good Kate Bishop is in other content like ABX versus more expensive targets like Makari, like Silk for World Boss Legend and stuff like that. But I lean towards Hawkeye because he has a little bit more AoE on a couple of his skills, and then he also has the iframe ignore on 3 and the iframe ignore on 6, and you actually stay on 6, because Kate does have iframe ignore on 6, but you don't stay on the 6th skill, so that's why I'm not really counting it. For those of you that are wondering, if you're not staying on the skill, you're not getting the iframe ignore. Like, the iframe ignore doesn't follow to the next skill unless it explicitly states that for the duration of the skill, it gives you iframe ignore. There are a couple of characters that buff themselves with iframe ignore, like Shang-Chi, but that's not the case for Kate Bishop and the vast majority of characters. If Kate Bishop's rotation was to stay on the 6th skill, then yes, you could have a similar playstyle to Hawkeye and get that similar result, but in Kate's case, swapping into 4 does a lot more damage. However, it suffers when you can't cancel out of it. And for those of you actually wondering, not that I am going to show you a clip because I don't want this video to be too long, but I actually tested Kate and Silk on stage 34 with this same exact team, and Silk was actually faster with the same identical build, CTP of energy, yada, yada, yada. So I don't think she's the best speed hero. I don't even think she may not even be top 3 for female speed hero, and that's okay, because I think she's very, very good. And what she does do is provide you with a very cheap option without needing a whole bunch of other buffers, because a lot of the other speed characters, or a lot of the other characters that she's compared to, like Makari, like Captain Falcon, Spider-Man, etc., they need White Fox, and they need those other buffs because of that leadership passive. Kate Bishop doesn't need any of that, right? She rocks out on her own, or they need ignore dodge strikers. Kate Bishop doesn't need any of that. She rocks out on her own. So my sort of final analysis is that for my personal roster and for rosters that are super stacked, I don't think Hawkeye and Kate Bishop are really bringing anything new to the table. In terms of Kate Bishop, I'd rather use Makari, or I'd rather use someone else. And then in terms of Hawkeye, I really like using him, but I sometimes would rather just use Captain Falcon. And although I wasn't able to show you a bad run with Hawkeye where he has really bad targeting versus Ultron, let me now show you how insane the targeting is for Captain Falcon. And again, I could swap out Taskmaster for White Fox and get an even more insane buff. Can I get a dodge here? And doesn't pop off with the thing. I've missed a few procs already, but his damage, even when you miss procs, is good. And so you basically, you know, this is basically what it comes down to for me. I canceled, but look at this. He was in one corner and he went into the middle, and Falcon's still doing his 5th skill. That's how good it is, right? So it's sort of like, it's kind of opposite in that sense, where Falcon basically can't get interrupted versus Hawkeye sort of being easily interrupted. So Captain America Falcon is actually the character that I think has some of the best targeting in the game for individual skills, particularly when opponents are moving around. And that's sort of where I highlight, like, that's the best way to highlight the difference between Hawkeye and Captain America Falcon. It's really funny because Hawkeye doesn't miss his procs in terms of gameplay, but you can miss the damage because the boss moves. Whereas Captain America Falcon can miss his procs, but you won't miss the damage, you won't miss the hits, because he's flying, so he's just following the boss around wherever he goes, like, you know, peanut butter on bread. So yeah, that's sort of the shakedown for me. You know, it's not the most glowing review of these two characters, and I'm probably the YouTuber that's the least hype about them now that I've had time to extensively test them, especially with CTPs. I still think they're good characters, but as I said, and sort of to summarize, I think these characters are best utilized or best highlighted on newer accounts, right? And accounts that don't have access to really strong passive support buffs like White Fox and things like that. Because and those ignore dodge strikers like Daisy, Deathlock, you know, Agent Venom, blah blah blah. Because as just standalone characters without all those buffs, Hawkeye and Kate Bishop are absolutely fantastic, and she's also a very good and very cheap alternative to Makari for something like ABX. So excellent characters. However, for stacked accounts, I'm not sure they're bringing too much to the table that I haven't already seen, and they're not really making my life easier in any content. If anything, they're making my life a little bit more frustrating because I have to be so hyper focused on where the boss is in order to not miss my damage and have the boss move out of it and sort of just see the HP stop moving. And then, you know, I'm like, dang, I gotta there's a lot of resets, right? A lot of resetting involved in this video, shooting this video, but also in general when I try to play with these characters. So yeah, hopefully that review helps you out. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.